This morning I played a game that I think was a very instructive game, and I wanted to share it with fellow improving players. And that game actually came out of the Potter variation of the Scotch opening. So let's go through the game here, and then we'll have some additional discussion after the game is done. So the first question people might have is, what is Chessable doing playing e4? That's a very good question. And so I'll circle back to that after we go through the game and discuss why I'm throwing that into the mix. But let's just move on with the game for now. So the Scotch game is where you play d4 here. And the Potter variation is when black plays bishop to c5. They have other choices. They could play knight to f6. There's other things they can do, but one of the most common things is knight to c5 or bishop to c5, and the Potter variation is when you play knight to b3, hitting that bishop. And so this game becomes quite instructive because normally I've been a player that plays more closed openings, like out of d4, queen 4 openings, and they don't become as open. So time is not, it's always important, but it's not as important of an element as it is in these open games. So this here is just standard moves so far. And this is a move that I got from ChessGoals, which I'll talk about that when we get done, but that is what I'm using as a resource for a number of different things, but for this opening, this e4 opening that I'm going to be playing for a bit. And we'll circle back to that at the end, though. And now in the game, black played queen to f6. And this is not a real common move. You probably see it at the club level, maybe one game out of 10 or so. And I actually just started playing this Scotch opening, started studying this Potter variation 3 days ago. So, I'm not totally prepared, but I feel like I have some, a good grasp of some of the general ideas. I did play the move that's theory here. And now here is where black varied from theory. And I'll talk about that at the end too, but the Scotch is, a little bit offbeat. I think it's probably the third or fourth most common reply to e5. And then when you play this Potter variation and you combine it with this queen to e2, you get people out of book real quickly. And that's what happened in this game. And we'll talk about that at the end. And that's what I really like about these ChessGoals courses. But in the game, black played knight to d4. And that's something I think we should look at and discuss a little bit. Now, the actual common way, or the theory way to play this, and the most principled way to play this, because we're playing in these open games, you want to get developed as quickly as possible. You can't afford to waste time. Time is a very important element and commodity in these open games. So that's why black in this position will usually play knight to e7 to get castled quickly, so they don't get into trouble like they do in this game. Now, how the ChessGoals responds to this is kind of interesting. You would play h4, and the idea is you're going to bring your bishop out to g5. And so because of that, black will often play h6 and give you this hook that you can use to attack their king later. And we won't go into that, but we'll look real briefly at what kind of the main idea of this Potter variation is. But if we go back to the actual game, instead of playing knight to e7, my opponent played knight to d4. And so maybe just pause and just take a moment and just think about how you feel about that move. I know we just got done talking about the element of time. And so when I saw this move, I knew, it wasn't something I'd studied, I had gone through this variation. And, I hadn't seen this, and I thought, well, there's a very good reason for that, because black is moving a piece a second time in an open position, right? So we're playing the pawn to king 4 openings here. They're open. Like I said, time is important. He just spent a second move on the same piece. So that's one thing to know, is that, especially when you play these open positions, but just in general, if you move a piece for a second time in the opening, you want to have a real concrete reason why you're doing that. You want to understand why you're doing it. And if you don't, you're better off, if you don't know the theory, you're better off moving a piece that hasn't been developed yet, like in this case, knight to e7, getting castled, and then you're not going to get steamrolled. But when he moves a second piece like this, knight to d4, we already have an advantage in this position. Now, it's not a winning advantage yet, but it's a significant advantage. And so I took here, and now black took back with the bishop. And so let's look at that move and maybe pause the video and say, pretend you were playing white. How would you respond to this? See if you can figure out how to punish this move. And so I think one of the key things is knowing that we are in an open position. He has wasted time. And if we go back and look at the consequence of this move, and I'll put a link above me here, or at the top of the screen, to this video that Michael Spizner was nice enough to make with me about his WTF wall thought process. And ironically, he's playing the Scotch game as well right now, I believe. But the first thing in his thought process algorithm is to look at what weaknesses are created by your opponent's move. You want to do that before you start reacting or become afraid or notice something you think you have to respond to or correct. First, you want to look at what consequences, what weaknesses your opponent has, and if you have a forcing move that you can use to improve your position. So the W is for the weakness, the first W in the WTF, and the F is for forcing move. And so we do, in fact, have a forcing move here that improves our position. And it's actually a winning position. And the consequence of this move, one major consequence, is this bishop is no longer protecting that c7 pawn. And so we can immediately exploit that move by playing knight to d5. And look, we're gaining time on the queen, and we're threatening to play knight to c7. So that's what I did in the game, using that thought process, and just my antenna went up when he moved that knight a second time, wasting time in an open position. Now he plays queen to d6. And now here is where I made this move too quickly. I only spent like 10 seconds on this move. But let's do an exercise where you pause the video, and you try to find the best move. And in doing so, look at the consequence of black's last move. Black's last move, we were attacking his queen. We were threatening c7. So he says, okay, I'm going to get my queen away from being attacked. And I'm also going to defend c6. But that has a consequence. So see if you can figure out what that consequence is and how you can punish it. All right, well, that consequence is that this bishop is no longer protected by the queen on f6. And so I played this move too quickly because I had seen something I thought was good, and I ended up with a good position, and we'll go through that. But we had an immediate knockout here by playing queen to c4. The idea being is it's a really interesting double attack because the queen is attacking the bishop on d4, and we're also attacking, the queen supports the knight attacking on c7, which is a fork of the king and the rook. So this is just a devastating position. This is just winning. There is no way for the opponent out of this position. He's going to lose something, right? And this move was not that hard to spot. You just had to look at the consequence of this move here. No longer protecting that bishop. But in the game, I played too quickly, and I ended up, instead of queen to c4 here with the knockout, I ended up just playing bishop to f4. I was kind of fixated on that square. And I had seen this kind of ahead, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. He'll have to move over there, and I can just play this, and I'm going to get this good position. And I should have thought more about the consequence. I kind of like skipped that step. I was looking at the consequence of this alignment here, but not necessarily that he gave up protection of the bishop. So in the game, he plays the only move he really can. It's forced. He has to play bishop to e5, and I take, he takes. Now he's threatening this here, so I just castled, and this is kind of what I had seen ahead. I'm like, well, this is great because I'm gonna then, this knight will protect this. I'll get these two pawns in the center, and I'll have, I'm ahead in development, and I'm just gonna try to steamroll this guy. And so I was actually expecting him to play c6 here and kick my knight back. And I was, kind of working on that, on what my response was. I thought I was going to probably play knight to c3 here. Now, ironically, at this point, my opponent, I think, is realizing, oh, I'm behind in development here. I have to get castled. And he ends up playing knight to f6. He wants to get castled. He'd like to trade stuff off, but we have a good tactic here. It's one of my favorite tactics, actually. So if you want to pause the video and look at this, how we can punish this move is a central pawn roller has been set up. So this f4 was on my radar screen from before. So you play f4, and look, this queen is under attack. We haven't left our attack on c7 yet because he hasn't castled yet. And so in the game, my opponent actually just resigned. But the idea is if he plays queen to d6 to avoid letting us fork him, then we have this central pawn fork. And when you have these open positions and your opponent wastes time, sometimes these central pawn forks will actually show up on the board. So I thought that was a really interesting game, very instructive. And then I'll just discuss a little bit about why I'm mixing in the Scotch for now. So the reason that I'm playing the Scotch now is because I am doing this pretty intense chess improvement process based on this book by Michael de La Maza called Rapid Chess Improvement. And I'll put a link to a video where I talk about starting that up above if you're interested. But basically the first 5.5 months of this are very intense with tactics and board vision. And so I wanted to play some openings while I'm doing this that give me more tactics in the game so I can analyze the game, have more tactical opportunities come up, learn more tactics, because it's kind of like the thing that underpins the entire program. So, and then the reason I'm doing the Scotch is that I'm fortunate that I have a lifetime access pass to ChessGoals. And so I have access to a number of different opening courses that they have. And I said, well, as long as I'm doing this de La Maza, why don't I just use the courses that they have? Because I really like their courses, and play the more aggressive courses because I have access to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be playing I'm going to be playing e4, and their response in their e4 course to e5 is the Scotch. And then I'm going to be playing the Binko Gambit and the Sicilian Dragon. And so another thing I learned too is by being involved in that ChessGoals community, I'm coming to appreciate the importance of activity. Matt, he's a chess master that was one of the two founders of ChessGoals, and he often emphasizes how important, and his courses kind of prioritize positions where you can play actively, and that even extends through the end game. But so that's why I'm mixing in this Scotch, and I can flip through real quick here and kind of show you just kind of like, this was kind of an unusual line that the opponent played, but kind of like a general thing in this Potter variation. Normally they'll move back like so. And in the ChessGoals course, they play queen to e2. Now, most commonly you'll see d6. And you might get a position this would be kind of a fairly typical position that you might get. And then kind of like a general idea is what frequently happens in this Potter variation is we go for a pawn storm, a kingside attack. And it's kind of easier for us to attack. We have this opposite side castling, and it's easier for us to attack than it is for them. Like our attack comes more quickly. And so, you know, I want to learn some attacking, and I want to have more opportunities for tactics. And this was actually the first classical time control game I played in this Potter variation of the Scotch since I basically started learning this opening 3 days ago. And so, yeah, I figured I would just give a shout out to ChessGoals. I know tomorrow they have a live class. I think it's about once a month they usually have a live class. And it's at 11 a.m. Eastern time in the United States. And that's on usually one Saturday a month. Matt puts on a class. And it's cool because it's an interactive class where, you know, he'll ask questions to the people watching, and then there'll be discussions, and I've gotten a lot of value from those. Actually, I'll put a link to that course up above. Let me get it pulled up here. All right, so I'll put a link to that down in the video description. I don't know if it'll let me link to a live class that's pending for tomorrow, but you could go to the ChessGoals YouTube channel, click on live, and then get at it from that, and you can see that it says live in 22 hours at 10 a.m. Central Time, because I'm in Central Time, but 11 Eastern Time. So I would recommend doing that. You know, it's very, very, very good opportunity. And then if you find this Potter variation interesting, the ChessGoals, I really like the way that they've designed the course. And I know their other founder of ChessGoals had a video where he was drilling lines from this course in Chessable. So I'll pull that up real quick here. So I got that pulled up, and I'll put a link to that. That way, you know, if it's something you might be interested in, you could kind of look at and get a flavor of what those lines are like by watching Jesse here drill those lines in Chessable. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. I hope everybody has a good holiday season, and we'll look forward to making another video before too long.